So yeah, thank you so much for the opportunity to interview you guys. Really enjoyed the short film. Found it to be very poignant and relatable, and emotional. So yeah, thank you for your work on that. Sean, I'd like to start with you. What drew you initially to telling Troy's story, and how did you become involved in the project?
Yeah, so this all starts with me joining John and his initiative, right? John started Dad Saves America, and we had been working together on another doc. Um, and so when Troy, received the Oscar and kind of dedicated it to his dad and kind of led on what happened in his life, right? His dad, Troy's obviously was born into a hearing family, and he said his dad was this hero, and that his dad was the best signer, and then his dad got into an accident and couldn't sign to him anymore. He's paralyzed from the neck down from a drunk driving accident. Um, that sort of, we came to the office the next day and we were like, oh my gosh, did you see that? That was incredible. Um, and yeah, that's the beginning. We had to tell that story.
Yeah, John, I wanted to ask you too, and Sean, you alluded to this, that it kind of aligned with some of your other interests and values. Do you mind speaking a little bit about why To My Father and Troy's story kind of aligned with your, the values of your organization and of fatherhood that you try to champion?
Yeah, I appreciate that question. So like Sean said, we're a nonprofit, media organization, media company doing films and docs. And Sean and I were working on another film about how to lift people up out of homelessness. And so we're always looking for stories that are about the way people can overcome the challenges that they face, sort of rise above being marginalized, being victimized, and see the heroic potential in themselves. And that was something that was so exciting about Troy's story. And then we had this lucky connection in that my manager, Mark Finley, also manages Troy. So we had this entry point to pitch Troy on both coming on our show, which is, sort of a very cinematically filmed podcast called Dad Saves America, where we tell these kind of stories and interview people about them, and then also say, hey, we're filmmakers. We would love to expand on what you shared with the world on the stage at the Oscars. And then just a little bit of real quick background is, so I'm a dad, and so is Sean, and so is a lot of the folks here. And before starting Emergent Order years ago, I was a creative director at Spike TV, which is like the first network for men. Now it's Paramount Network.
Yeah.
And I ran an initiative called True Dads. So this sort of importance of fatherhood, and I think the importance of sharing a positive vision for men of what we can do and be that's healthy and positive is just as a deep, really important thing for me.
No, and that definitely shines through in the short. That connection between his father is really the emotional crux of the short. I think one of there's a beautiful line in the short where Troy says that his father didn't see him as deaf; he saw him as capable. And that line really struck me, and it was very poignant. I guess a question for both John and Sean: was there a moment in Troy's story, a line or something that really struck you that you remember kind of particularly resonating with you?
Go ahead, Sean.
Yeah, I would say that probably one of the most moving lines for me is actually is one of his lines from his graduation speech that we've got footage that his brother filmed, and that and this is after his accident, and he's telling the stadium full of all of his high school families, and pretty big football stadium, that he wants to pursue filmmaking. He wants TV and film, and he doesn't feel like he's abandoning his dad. And that, and then he says, my dad said he can't be here with me physically, but he's here with me spiritually. That was pretty powerful. Knowing that just a month or so ago, he had this accident and that he's out there and like just announcing to this stadium. I was talking to somebody else recently. I was like, oh man, like I lost my brother right before my graduation too. And there's absolutely no way that I could have stood in front of an audience and done that.
Yeah,
that's incredible.
it's funny. I shared in another conversation that there's been a lot of personal connections to Troy's story. My dad was injured in a way that severely handicapped him, in a similar way through a drunk driver, and that fear and that anger that Troy is experiencing when he talks about how he was angry at God and angry at the world for doing this to this hero that loved him and that was his protector and, was his champion, really resonates with me a lot. And I think one thing that, we put forward in the film is how Troy's dad's faith is a light for his family, and whether you have faith or not, I think that there's just something really beautiful about that, and it is in these moments where faith is a powerful thing to draw on, and it was central to his dad's life, and it was something he did pass on to Troy, and I think it helped him get through that and be able to get on that stage, and so I think that resonates a lot with me.
Yeah, that faith piece I think is really interesting because, like you said, even if it doesn't necessarily resonate with you personally, that there's something about that is very powerful. Sean, I want to ask. So in the short film, you couple Troy's stories with these interesting vignettes with actors portraying these kind of seminal events in Troy's life. How did you go about crafting those little vignette scenes? And how did you ensure that they kind of mapped accurately onto how Troy experienced those events?
Yeah, so these are all stories that Troy told us in our pre-interviews and in our actual interviews that were like these pivotal moments in his life. And so we had to tell them. One of the challenges working with a narrator who signs, right? It's like you can't cover that signing up, right? Like, and so we rethinking how to craft the project was a challenge, and it was awesome at the same time, right? Like stepping out, it allows for you to analyze things from different perspectives, and so with those reenactments, right? We ended up we just had to like have real deaf actors, right? Real deaf people playing these roles, especially the roles of Troy himself, right? So we had 3 or 4 Troys, 3 different Troys, including 4 being himself, and none of them had. Like we did a casting calls for all over Texas and beyond. We were trying to get people from New York, and it was very difficult. And so we ended up just going with some first-time actors and working with them quite a bit. And I was just super proud of the jobs that they did, and it was an amazing experience. And we made a lot of great friendships and with interpreters and their families and stuff. It was awesome.
No, I really enjoyed those scenes. I think it added a kind of visual language to what Troy was speaking to, that made the emotions hit even harder. John, I have to ask, kind of poetically, this this film and kind of debuting at Tribeca nicely aligns with Father's Day, and
Right.
making it kind of particularly relevant in, you know, a couple weeks time. I'm wondering if that was an intention, or if that was intended to map the release of the film onto at the festival onto this holiday. It seems very fitting.
Well, I think it's incredible good luck, right? Because obviously, I think there's something like 8,000 short films that get submitted to the Tribeca Film Festival. So we're so grateful to have been accepted. It's such a hard thing to do. And so it does all align in a really beautiful way, because I do think that, you know, Troy and I are going to go on the Today Show that morning. And that's the, you know, it's going to be, I think for the viewers of the Today Show, the Tribeca Film Festival might not be on their radar as much as Father's Day. So there's this really neat moment. And it's funny because this time last year is when we filmed with Troy. And so we actually we filmed basically like a couple days before Father's Day, and we put out a little message from him on the stage. So if you go to our YouTube channel, you know, youtube.com/dadsavesamerica, and you go back a year ago, you'll see a great message, and it's on the stage that ends up in the film interview. And yeah, I think it's always great when you can, you know, be relevant to people with your story. And if you can make the timing work, that's even better. You know, so much of our business is about timing. And so hopefully this will help it reach more people.
No, definitely. I think that stroke of good luck is really, really apt. Yeah, I did have a question, I guess, for both of you. And making a film like this, there's a careful balance to strike, right, between kind of advocacy and education, and at the same time, telling Troy's story and kind of appealing to those emotions. What was that like to kind of try and find that balance between being kind of informative about the deaf community, about Troy, while also, you know, personally touching into some of those emotions?
Want to take it, Sean?
I don't know. You just make the film. You take it.
Yeah. So well, I think one of the things that's so great about Troy's story is that there's no need to impose an advocacy lens on his story, right? I think this is one of the things that's a challenge. You know, there's this, maybe it's apocryphal quote from I think Samuel Goldwyn, like, if you want to send a message, use Western Union. And, you know, and I think one of the challenges we face as storytellers is storytelling is such a powerful way to get moral lessons out into the world. Like the Bible is nothing but stories. You know, Christ taught in parables. So did Maimonides. Like these are, you know, so did Muhammad. Like these are, storytelling is the way we transmit our virtues out beyond what we can act out for people who know us personally. And so I think we have that opportunity and that burden and that and sometimes that impulse. And so we're trying. It's just, I think if you can find a story like Troy and his dad, where that's all wrapped together, then you get to just be a great storyteller, which is about, to me, it's about, I think of it like the word character has two meanings. So we have the character in the protagonist, and then we have your character, the kind of person you are. And I think of storytelling as a character revealing their character through their actions. I think that's one way to think about what a story actually is. And there's a message in that about what it means to live a moral life. And I think this story does that without needing to say anything about identity or any of that stuff. Like it's all there. It's all there for you as the audience to take away. And we don't need to beat you over the head with any of that.
Yeah, and I definitely didn't get that impression. I think it was handled very, very delicately. Do you mind if I just ask one more question? I'm sorry, I know we hit the 15.
No, go for it.
So yeah, so there's between To My Father and the documentary, Sean, that you mentioned, Beyond Homeless. You both seem to have this interest in marginalized groups, I guess, in different ways with both the deaf community and the homeless community. I guess I wanted to conclude on a note related to that of why do you think those stories are important to tell?
Sean, take it.
Yeah. Well, because they're more exciting. For one, right? Like there's more drama in those stories, right? But then, you know, just from social perspective, like we need to understand. We need to understand what our brothers and sisters in different positions that we are experiencing in life, and what's going on, right? So yeah, it's just, you know, I was very fortunate. I grew up growing up living overseas and experiencing a lot of different cultures. So that's always been an interest of mine, is like sort of bringing the notion of otherness in terms of culture, right, and drawing it into the universal experience of humanity, right? Like that's, you know, these people on the fringes, on the margins, they are us, right? They're just going through the same things in different forms, right? And the quicker that we understand that, right, the more that we can do things about it, right? We sort of more empathy that we have.
Yeah, I would add that that's been a thread of work that Sean has done independently, that I've done independently. I directed a documentary called The Pursuit that followed an economist, Arthur Brooks, around the world, talking about the way, I mean, frankly, the way that capitalism has helped lift hundreds of millions of poor people around the world out of poverty, especially in places like India and China. And we have so much othering going on that I think there's a lot of different ways to see that. I think that one of the things that I hope we can move towards, I think there's been an incredible expansion of our circle of concern morally, right, to people outside ourselves. And it's pushing back against this tribal instinct that's very natural. You know, we're birds of a feather. We're still animals. We're still like, oh, you look different than me. Are you from the other tribe coming to steal our grains? Like there's like this stuff that's hundreds of thousands of years old that we think we've gotten past, but yeah, good luck. But I think that the best way to explore the best way to tell a story to me is to find what is universally human in that experience. That's what we're trying to do with this movie. And I think when we do that, then it's truly inclusive, because we're saying this is a story that every person can learn from. This is an experience that isn't about what I can judge from you from across the room. It's about what's below the surface, because I don't know that much about you from across the room. And I don't know that you're deaf from across the room. I don't know that you can look really well put together and be like a handsome white male and have grown up with a single mom in desperate poverty in Appalachia. And I don't know that from across the room. And so to me, it is about, like, drama is about struggle and overcoming it, and building the version of yourself that you want to have, and that is the best for everyone around you. And so I think that there's more complexity to how we both think about that kind of storytelling that your question is asking about than I think is maybe sometimes it gets a little tokenized, and we're sort of coming at it from a very different perspective in that respect.